learners, I welcome you all to the second segment of lecture 7. In the last segment, we discussed about the protection to foreign investment in the context of colonies. So, in this segment, we will look at the protection given to foreign investment in the context of non-colonies. Even in case of non-colonies, we could see the capital exporting countries employed different strategies to offer protection to foreign investment. One of them was, exemption from the jurisdiction of the host state or extraterritorial application of their own laws, the home state laws. Sometimes European countries did not shy away from using force for giving protection to the foreign investment because they felt it was justified and it was their right to use force to give protection to the foreign investment. So, this formed the basis for gunboat diplomacy. So, gunboat diplomacy was used as a strategy to give protection to foreign investment. What we see here is, at least in the context of Latin America, we could see that there was a different version of protection. I mean, the Britain did not follow its usual strategies. What it did in the context of Latin America was, in Latin America, the Britain wanted to counter Spanish influence also. So, it sort of sought protection from the local laws that governed generally, right? I mean, the aim for Britain it was there to counter Spanish influence. So, Britain merchants met with the ruling government. For instance, you take Buenos Aires. When there was a change in government in Buenos Aires, what Britain merchants did was they met with the members of incoming junta. And then there was a deal that was agreed between junta and the Britain merchants that their interest would be protected. Britain merchants' interest would be protected. So, through local laws itself or through local governance itself, they sought the protection. So, this is different from other ways of seeking protection for foreign investment, which Britain had earlier employed. We'd seen that it did not follow the method that it did in Africa. It didn't sort of interfere too much with the local rules, nor it did not insist on extraterritorial application of European laws in the context of Latin America like it did with China or Japan. So, here Britain merchants sort of had a deal with the government that was already there. And what had happened was, in Latin America eventually became a high volume, low cost producer. There was so many investment in the agriculture sector. So, the economic activity was giving economic development to Latin American countries. So, eventually there were the countries, the economic activities, foreign investment, all of them led to a system wherein a new group of landowners, large landowners were coming in the context of Latin America. So, these large landowners, they voluntarily adopted Britain's concept of property. I mean, the elitism that otherwise existed in Britain, now with the emerging landowners, large landowners, they also adopted the Britain's concept of property. So, then here you could see that, when the local laws of Latin American countries itself support the ideas of property which Britain had, the protection to foreign investment is sort of it's sorted. The local laws itself gave protection to foreign investment in the context of Latin American countries. But this was not a very smooth ride. There were instances where Britain had to, or United States had to invoke gunboat diplomacy. In the context of Britain, we could see the Venezuela arbitration of 1903. In the context of US, we could see the Paraguay and United States Navigation Company as well. So, if we look at Latin America itself, they lacked the sophistication, especially when it came to public utilities. So, that is where we could see lot of investment from Britain as well as United States into these sectors. For example, Britain investors had huge concession for building railways, postal system, and roads and other public utilities, and we see that United States had invested in mining, oil, agriculture, because Latin Americans, their engineering and metallurgical sector was not as developed as that of Britain or United States. So in these areas, lot of concessions were granted to foreign investors. In fact, so much so that we could see that a very extensive concession was given. We could see that probably these concessions were granted because of huge pressure from the capital exporting countries. They were, some of them were exploitative in nature as well. The concessions were heavily favoring the investors, and it was not a balanced one. That was the situation in Latin America, maybe because of the use of gunboat diplomacy or whatever be the reason, these sort of arrangements did exist. So if we look at the US Paraguay and United States Navigation Company, so this company had invested in Paraguay, and then the company's agent, Mr. Edward Hopkins, was also the US consul in Paraguay, and the company had land, factories, machineries and all of that. The company had mortgaged some of its assets, some of its land, and also the company failed to comply with certain licensing regulations of Paraguay. So initially Edward Hopkins had a very good relationship with the Paraguay president, but eventually their relationship deteriorated, and then the Paraguay government took some action against the company's land, because it was anyway mortgaged, as well as they failed to comply with some licensing regulations. So then Edward Hopkins left Paraguay. He went to the United States. He complained that he's been expelled from Paraguay, and then US Congress approved the president to send naval ships to Paraguay. And when the US naval ships reached Parana River in Argentina's border, then Paraguay immediately decided to submit the matter to arbitration for settlement. Right? US is in fact demanding 1 million. I mean, this is a case that happened in 1854. Imagine 1 million as compensation from Paraguay, a developing country. And that is how a private company's interests were espoused by the United States. Sometimes it's not just the threat of using naval force, they had to use the naval force as well. At least in Paraguay's case, the moment the ship reached the Argentine border, they agreed to settle the matter by referring it to arbitration. In case of the Venezuela, so what Venezuela did was, there was a civil war in Venezuela from till 1902. So during the civil war period, many foreigners, they had complained that they had personal injuries, they were unlawfully imprisoned, and their properties were seized and taken and all of that. And especially the German and Britain bondholders stated that the Venezuela government did not service their bonds, and there were many other complaints as well. So diplomatic interventions were made by Germany, Britain and Italy. All three of them made diplomatic interventions, but Venezuela kept on insisting if there was anything, if they wanted to espouse, if they had any grievance with regard to their nationals, they had to take it up in the domestic forums. Venezuela maintained a stance that it had to be taken only through the domestic forums. So then eventually we would see that Germany and Britain had bombed Caracas in December 1902, and they blocked the coastline of Venezuela. That is when Venezuela agreed to set up a mixed claims commission in order to resolve those disputes. So Venezuela arbitration of 1903 was a result of this. Right. So here we could see that it's not just threat of using the force, but rather the force was actually used. So in the context of Latin America, the protection to foreign investment happened through the local structure itself, the local institutions itself. Sometimes the capital exporting countries like the United States or Britain had to resort to gunboat diplomacy as well, sometimes use of force as well. But eventually we do see that the concessions that were granted to foreigners were extensively in favor of the foreigners itself. So one-sided concession was granted to them in whatever way that the capital exporting countries enjoyed some sort of protection through various mechanisms itself in the context of Latin America, even when other regions, look at Asia and Africa around the same timeline, they were all still colonies. But in the context of Latin America, they were not a colony, but still the protection to foreign investment was still afforded in case of Latin American countries. Maybe because of their long independence or something, it was actually the Latin American countries which would challenge the protections given to foreign investment. We will discuss about it in the in the future videos, but then we would see that Latin American countries would be the first one to challenge these strategies that are used by kept exporting countries to afford protection to foreign investment. So in the next segment I will discuss about Britain's policy and how it sort of had different policies in different places in different time periods for affording protection to foreign investment. That is important because Britain was responsible for opening up markets, opening up other countries' territories in order to sort of bring an international commercial framework. It did not do it only for giving access to Britain merchants, but access to everybody. So it makes us pertinent to understand Britain's foreign policy. So that's something we'll discuss in the next segment. Thank you.